modern technology, man.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm so glad to finally meet you in person. I've heard a lot about you from Travis and Nick and Nigel, and I've been reading Ohio Capital Journal for years now. And give me a brief thing about Ohio Capital Journal. You guys cover all the political news here in Ohio, from the big cities to the rural stuff to the state legislature. Um, you were never in print. You was always electronic.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, so because we offer first of all, thank you very much for both your readership and, yes, same. I've always heard about you and seen the movies and everything.
Uh
So
oh.
I appreciate actually connecting in person. It's nice to meet you as well. Um, but yes, so Ohio Capital Journal has never been in print. We were launched as digital only, but because we are a nonprofit newsroom and kind of a secondary mission, in addition to covering Ohio government and policy and politics and stories of impact, a secondary mission is just to be really supportive of journalism in general. And so we are free to republish, and we get republished by about 40 different local newspapers, radio stations, TV stations, independents, alternatives, fellow nonprofits, all around Ohio. So really, everywhere from the Sandusky Register to the Urbana Daily Citizen
Oh
to
wow.
the Athens Messenger. Our stories are in print, but we don't print them ourselves.
Gotcha. And you've got a pretty good staff. You sort of cover the waterfront here in Ohio. And but I stumbled on a story of, I think it was May 23rd in 25, about the U.S. News and World Report kind of synopsis that you provided about Ohio, the stellar report that Ohio just hit it out of the park in the U.S. News and World Report's summary of states, and the magazine back in the day, U.S. News and World Report. If you even mentioned in that their reviews of, say, you were at a hospital, the best
Mhm.
hospitals in the country, or the best universities, it was a big deal.
Oh, when I was going to college, yeah, that's what we looked. You had to go to a bookstore and get it off the shelf and look up the best colleges in the country and stuff. And yeah, it was a big deal.
Yeah, so here we are, May 23rd, 2025. You sort of summarized the latest U.S. News and World Report state report. And I
Yeah.
just can't believe how well 26 years of Republican leadership has done for the citizens, the tax-paying citizens of Ohio. It we are. It starts off really depressing, and it gets even more depressing. We slid. Your first paragraph is, we slid from number 36 to number 38, in between the iterations of the U.S. News and World Report's statewide summary. And some of the things they rank states on is healthcare, crime and corrections, overall education, infrastructure. We're number 30. That's pretty good. 25 in fiscal stability. Um, what do you think? 26 years of Republican leadership,
Yeah,
and
it's
we're kind of, if we were 38 overall in college football, I don't know what would happen.
right. Yeah, actually, there's probably fresh rankings for 2026, and I should update that. But yes, it's Ohio has slid in almost every category that you can imagine over the last 15, 20 years in those rankings. And to the point where these days, I don't. there might be some very individual subcategories that we might rank in the top half of states,
Well, yeah,
but by and large,
college football.
yeah, right. But by and large, we are in the bottom half of states at least, if not in the bottom 15, on almost every major category you can think of. And it to me it's just really sad, to be honest, because I I think that Ohio has so much more potential to this than this. I think that we know the evidence-based solutions to a lot of these problems, and I think that there are certain barriers in state government that are really preventing us from living up to the potential that we could as a state. And it's sad to see this sliding. Like there are some things that are uncontrollable, such as an aging population and brain drain and stuff like that, and people leaving the state for shinier, fancier cities. But then there's some of this stuff that is totally controllable, such as education and colleges and universities and basic infrastructure and opportunities.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
it's sad to see, mostly for me, to see what's happened to Ohio, considering I do know our potential.
Yeah. Yeah. Higher education ranks number 41 out of 50. Um,
Right.
why don't we? Why don't we? What is this? I'm sure. I think with the lack of newspapers or the gradual devolution of newspaper readership over the past X number of years, this would have been on the front page, I think, maybe on in most newspapers back in the day.
Um,
The fact we're 38 ranked out of 50 states in all of these various important economic, educational, healthcare, crime statistics. Um, but it kind of we don't. It doesn't really get a lot of coverage.
no, it doesn't. And you touched on something that I think is actually really important, especially as just as a journalist and someone who really believes in the local newspaper. And my friend Beth Macy actually wrote a recent book called Paper Girl about Urbana, Ohio. And she tied a lot of our modern problems to the death of the local newspaper in Urbana. But
Uh,
you could say that about almost any city in Ohio. You could say it about my hometown of Ashtabula and what's happened there. You could say it about the newspapers dying in Athens. You could say it about Springfield or Sandusky or any of these cities really across Ohio. And that is to say, basically, that these communities, by losing their local newspapers, which are mostly staffed by one person these days, if they're still around at all,
yeah.
um, they've lost a common sense of community and thread and narrative and accountability for their public officials, both at the local and state level. And that's a tragedy, really, because we're increasingly connected to this national narrative that has very little to do with our actual daily lives and the actual communities that we live in and our friends and neighbors and the issues that we face. And it's totally disconnected from that. Whereas our local news that's supposed to have this bond is kind of going away, at least in the traditional way. Um, there is nonprofit news outlets showing up in
Uh
some
huh.
of our smaller communities. Those are
Right.
important to follow. There's the Athens County Independent. There's the Richland Source, Mahoning Matters. Lots of places like BG Independent News. Lots of places like this around Ohio. So if you have one in your community, that's a great thing. You should follow them. Um, but I think you hit the nail on the head there that we've lost a lot of our common narrative and community sense with the death of local newspapers and local reporting. But there is lots of good local reporting out there. We just need to find it again.
Yeah. It's no. You have to look for it. It's probably mostly online,
Right.
which is kind of interesting. Not everybody, especially maybe people my age, are that conversant in finding news online. They probably go to some of the big, more national aggregators. Um, we in 2010, Ohio was ranked by Education Week as having the fifth best public school system, and today we are way off the mark on that. And Akron, as you point out, is looking at $44 million in cuts. And I know Columbus has major issues where I live.
50 million in
Yeah,
Columbus recently.
50. So what happened there? What happened to all that taxpayer money? I know. Did it all go to Jobs Ohio and the John Kasich fever dream?
A lot of it did. They give about 12. They've given out about $12 billion to that, while slashing education funding by billions of dollars. So there's an old line in politics that I happen to believe, and that's, don't tell me what you care about. Show me your budget, and I'll
Mm-hmm.
tell you what you care about. And a budget, if a budget is a matter of priorities, or in the highest sense, a moral document, that's where you go to see what happened. What happened basically is that back in 1999, in the DeRolf case, the Ohio Supreme Court
Uh-huh.
declared our property tax based system of funding education unconstitutional.
Yeah.
They created enormous inequalities between communities. It was unconstitutional. They declared that multiple times, actually, but it wasn't until the Strickland administration and the Democratic controlled Ohio House. This is the only time Democrats have controlled anything in the last 30 years in Ohio, basically. They haven't controlled the Senate, the Ohio Senate, at all. But they were able to pass what they called an evidence based model. And it was based on our best evidence of what works to get academic performance up. So it's not just throwing money at the problem,
Uh-huh.
it's using best practices in education to help students learn and adapt and grow the most effectively
Mm-hmm.
according to evidence based. So that's what he had funding there when we got that ranking in 2010.
This was the
Also,
State Department of Education.
yeah, this is the
Yeah.
State Department of Education, and just the formula basically for how districts of Ohio were funded. In 2010, it was the Tea Party wave. John Kasich was elected governor, and his very first priority of business was getting rid of the evidence based model. His second order of business was passing Senate Bill 5, which took away collective bargaining rights but was overturned by the voters. But anyway, that was the beginning of Ohio's historic disinvestment from public education, which is to say that since then, I should also mention, in addition to that, Kasich and the Republicans of that period in the legislature cut the local government fund drastically. And this
Uh-huh.
is the funding for local governments, counties and municipalities and townships that funds public works, police, fire, paramedics, emergency responders, all of that stuff. So they disinvested from public education in the form of slashing the budget, slashing the evidence based model, and basically not keeping up with inflation anymore. So, in
Mm-hmm.
sheer pure dollar numbers, the funding has gone up, but not in actual terms as far as what it costs to educate kids. So, but they also got rid of best practice standards. They got rid of curriculum standards and goals for yearly attainment, such as graduation rates, attendance rates, all of that type of stuff
Right.
too. They refigured all of that,
And
but
this is
fundamentally the
primarily
state just
public on the public education side, not
yeah.
private.
And meanwhile, they expanded money toward charter schools and private school
Uh-huh.
vouchers,
Right.
which go to religious schools and stuff. But this really all, so it began then in the
Mm-hmm.
Kasich administration, but it has ramped up and up and up and up since then, so that these days, in the most recent budgets, there was a brief attempt to do a full funding model. For two budget cycles, they had a bipartisan deal, the Cupp-Patterson model, to try to do that. It was supposed to be a 6-year phase in. They gave up after the first 4 years. They stopped the phase in. That was what happened most recently. But basically, the situation has only gotten worse over the last 16 years. Public school districts have been slashed by the state in
Uh-huh.
almost every budget cycle. And private and charter schools have been showered with cash in almost every budget cycle. So to the point where now we have near universal charters that are giving more than $1 billion a year to those private and religious schools through
Mm-hmm.
vouchers. And schools across Ohio are really struggling because the situation it's put them in is they have to go hat in hand to their local voters and try to ask for a levy.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the times the voters will pass that levy. But if the state lawmakers see that the local voters are passing the levy, they say, oh, well, they're going to pay for themselves, so we can get away with giving them even less money. So they cut them more. So the district has to go back to the voters and say we need even more because the state cut us more. And it creates this vicious loop where local, and this is true of local government funds as well, not just public education, but local communities are having to do more and more and more and more, while the state lawmakers are doing less and less and less and less.
Yeah. So this is something it's done on purpose. The purpose would be what? The Republican Party dislikes the teachers' union. Is it an anti-union thing? Is it a, I don't know, Kasich is supposed to be Christian. Is this a pro-Christian thing? He wants more Christian schools. So we have to take away from the public schools. What is the?
So I would say I would try to describe their argument. What they would say is this, and to be fair, there are some Republicans who are very supportive of public education, especially the ones who don't have charter and private schools in their counties and know that their kids in their counties have to rely on public
Yeah,
education.
right.
But the argument that they would make is that yes, teachers unions protect bad employees. They would argue that public schools are failing. They don't actually have much evidence for that. There are some drops in some test score attainment in some areas, but comparatively to, like, let's say 40 years ago, our public schools are actually much better than they used to be. But that's what they would say. They would say public schools are failing a lot of kids. They would say that families deserve to have school choice to send their kids to the schools that they want to send them to, whether that's a private school or a religious school or a public school. Um,
With state money.
and that's the unwritten part of what, that's the subtext that they're not saying, is that they're claiming that there's a lack of school choice. There's always school choice, but the Ohio Constitution provides for one system of government.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to choose to send your child to a private school or a religious school, the Ohio taxpayer is not obligated to pay for that. We are right now under law that there's being challenged in court as unconstitutional because the Ohio Constitution only provides for one system of public education, not multiple. So the argument
Mm-hmm.
is giving money to private schools is multiple. But the fact
Right.
of the matter is, once we implemented this universal charter schools, well, first of all, 90% of school students in Ohio go to public school.
Mm-hmm.
So how many billions are you going to give to the 10% who don't? And
Right.
then the other thing is the vast majority of people who are now taking this voucher money never attended public school. They're not choosing to go from public school to private school. They've always chosen private
Right.
school, and now the state is handing them out subsidies at the expense of our public schools and public
Yeah.
school students.
What is Amy Acton's? I've heard her a few times talk about the billionaire bros who are running the state, courtesy of Jobs Ohio. Is Jobs Ohio has that become a slush fund? I know.
Essentially,
I know. Kasich was quoted recently by one of your reporters as saying that Jobs Ohio went off mission or some sort of a term. They slid off the tracks, and to
yeah.
me, it sounds like Jobs Ohio is nothing but a slush fund to keep the Republicans in office, so they could just keep doing what they're doing with and
Yeah.
education. To me, education is so important.
Me too. I think you can judge a society or civilization pretty well based on how much it values education.
Yeah. So meanwhile, we are giving. But getting back to Amy,
Yeah.
what does she have a particular position on changing the funding system, or I don't know. I haven't looked that far into it.
Yeah. Yeah, just to quickly mention Jobs Ohio, yeah, that the Kasich administration privatized the Ohio Department of Development. They took our liquor money basically and gave it to this private corporation that they called Jobs Ohio, that is basically shielded from transparency that would normally exist in a regular public Ohio Department of Development. But and so far, from what we've seen from reports, they've given out $12 billion worth of public goods with very little to show for it. I think that they would point to some successes, but the actual reports show it hasn't been that great. As far as Amy Acton is concerned, I know that generally she opposes showering the private and religious schools with billions of dollars at the expense of the public schools. I know that she wants to invest more in our public education, at least enough to keep up with inflation. As
Right.
for her overarching plan for
Yeah.
Ohio education, I do not know the details of that. Like, I don't know what she has planned as far as requirements, best practices, that type of stuff.
Yeah. Um, so if she gets elected, big if, is Jobs Ohio insulated from any her doing anything about the way they operate?
You
For
know, that's
instance, doling out what 150 million of land purchases for the Intel deal up in New Albany,
right.
which is going to
Right.
result. Yeah, I mean that
If you want
Intel.
to
What
If
a
you want a
mess.
fun drive, go up and drive that. I
Yeah.
went to a golf course out there, and it was kind of sad and funny in a way because you have this beautiful, brand new 5-lane road with all of these roundabouts and fresh pavement and stuff, and it's next to this big, basically empty construction site field with all these cranes sitting there not doing a thing.
Yeah, amazing.
So it's a really wild experience to drive by that site right now. As to your question, she as governor, she has a variety of levers of power that she could use. She would need an act of the legislature to
Hmm.
actually change things back, so she can't really roll back Jobs Ohio. But what she could do is a lot of administrative stuff to provide transparency, to put a check on them,
Hmm.
um, to I don't know if she can. She There might be some deals, and it would be a negotiation in the budget process. You know, the actual allocations of funds and stuff. So while she couldn't just unilaterally roll back Jobs Ohio, she
Right.
could put a lot of checks on them and a
Hmm.
lot of transparency and accountability on them.
Yeah. Let's see. So the 500 million for the football stadium up in for the Browns. That was
Yeah.
not Jobs Ohio.
No, that was an act of the legislature.
Gotcha. So where Jobs Ohio, their model seems to be, I don't. What blows my mind is did Kasich is this what was Kasich's intention to fund the billionaires, whether it's Microsoft or Amazon, to build all their mega things here. They get millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars of tax write-offs, tax credits. For what?
So that's the part of the report that we reported on recently that there wasn't much of. There
I
wasn't much public benefit being shown. I mean, for instance, with the data centers, we are the public is paying for all of these data centers to subsidize them,
Yeah.
to use up all of our electricity and water and up all of our electric bills as well. So we're
Yeah.
both publicly subsidizing them for our own electricity bills to go up. I
Yeah.
think that's the part that just doesn't smell right to a lot of people, because there's been this huge backlash against it recently. Anything we publish about data centers, people get up in arms. And I think it's because they sense, and maybe some really smart Jobs Ohio person can explain to me how what seems so obvious is not obvious, but it seems just like common sense to everybody.
Yeah.
That, big tech is making out on the public dime.
Did you say big
and
tech or Vivek?
Big tech.
Okay.
Yeah. Big tech is making out on the public dime, and what
Yeah.
are we getting except for higher electricity bills? I don't know.
Yeah. I saw
don't know.
Kasich, oddly enough, I saw Kasich on an airplane a year ago.
Oh, yeah.
And I wanted to punch him in the nose. But you can't do that.
No.
And I just wonder if this was part of his billionaire bromance back in the day. It was just something in the back of his mind, hoping beyond hope that his little baby would grow up to be this billionaire bonanza.
I don't know. I think that they do sincerely believe somehow in trickle down economics and supply side.
Really? Okay.
I-
That makes sense.
I'll have to take them at their word for it. That's what they say, and I will, like, for the purposes of argument, I have to accept that is their legitimate belief, right?
Yeah.
But my question, what I don't understand, is that we've had 40 to 50 years of direct empirical evidence over whether that system works or not.
Right.
And every piece of evidence shows us that all of these jobs that are promised, this trickle-down effect, that if you just shower these corporations with more and more money, we're all going to be better off and every boat's going to be raised, it has never happened.
Yeah.
In fact, we have the worst wealth and income inequality we've ever seen in Ohio and in the United States after 40 to 50 years of these policies. Right. Where you can directly compare the 40 years prior to that, investing in the middle class, investing in consumers' ability to consume, that actually did raise all boats. We had the biggest growing middle class that America has ever seen. It's gone in the complete opposite direction since we've been trying this supply side trickle down ideology. Yeah. And at this point, it's ideology without evidence. They've been trying it for a long time and it just hasn't worked.
Yeah. Trump, is he a trickle down? Yeah, he's a trickle down guy, right?
I mean, he's given some of the two of the biggest tax cuts possible to the richest people possible. And all it's done is blow up the debt so that now we're over 100% of GDP in debt. And a lot of that has to do with these tax cuts.
Right. Yeah. Well, anyway, this is a very good read in Ohio Capital Journal. I recommend it to all of the folks who are watching and listening. Dave, I want to thank you very much. I think I told you we would do 15 minutes. We're a little bit past that. But anyway.
Fine.
Thanks an awful lot. And we'll catch you next time.
That sounds great. Thank you so much, Tom. It was great talking to you. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks. See you soon.
All right. Take care.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.